Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Mr. Butler's here. I believe all of us are here. Yes, I think we have all the commissioners with us. So with that, I'm just going to explain translation really quick, and then we'll get into the meat of the meeting. Sorry about that. Meeting interpretation services are available via Zoom by clicking on the global icon at the bottom of the screen. Maria, you're up.
Los servicios de interpretación están disponibles a través de Zoom al hacer clic en el icono de globo en la parte baja inferior de su pantalla a la derecha. Escoja la opción que dice Spanish.
Okay, so Spanish interpretation has been turned on. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are at the June 2nd, the inaugural Redistricting Commission. With us, we have all 7 commissioners. There are commissioners, 1 for each trustee area, as well as 2 that live outside the school district, but within Contra Costa County. Joining us are attorneys from Lozano Smith. They're going to be helping explain some of the history behind this. And we also have our new superintendent, Dr. Kenneth Hurst is with us. So I just wanted to introduce him and let him say a few words before we get started. I think this is day 11, Dr. Hurst, is that correct?
This is day 11. I'll just say it's a pleasure to be here. And if you have been following me, my track record, I'm actually from this area. And I've been in, well, not this area, but Southern California. And I've been in the San Diego region for 35 years as a teacher, an administrator, principal, associate superintendent, and then recently moved to the state of Washington, Eastern Washington, and was the superintendent there in Eastern Washington and back in California. So it feels good to be back. And it's really an opportunity and privilege to be serving in West Contra Costa. I've had an exciting 11 days, to say the least, and we are ready to engage in the work. So nice to join you this evening.
All righty, thank you, Dr. Hurst. I am now going to do the roll call. Let's start with Trustee Area 1, Mr. Omar Butler. I believe you are, yep, Mr. Butler is here. Area 2, Richie Cook.
Here.
Area 3, Ms. Genoveva Calloway.
Here.
Area 4, Mr. James Talua. Hopefully I didn't butcher that.
Present. Yes,
And-
Tualu, present.
Area 5, Mr. Derek Hilliard.
Present.
And then our 2 representatives that live outside the district, Vicki Gordon
Present.
and Craig Lazaretti.
Present.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for being here again. And pardon me if I'm looking, I have 2 different screens. So I'm looking the Zoom from a laptop and then I'm looking at my desktop. So apologies for that.
I did have a pop-up on my screen that was a question and answer that was, it's Scott Rafferty. And it asking, can you unlock the recording feature as required by the Brown Act? Are we supposed to?
Oh, this meeting is being recorded. It will be available later. It will be posted to the Redistricting website. If you guys aren't familiar, that is where the agendas live, some background history about how we got to this point, which the attorneys will explain in a little bit. In this meeting, the agendas, the minutes will all be on that same website as well too. For the public, I'll put it in the chat once I stop talking, but it's www.wccusd.net/redistricting commission.
Perfect. Thank
And
you.
then everybody's had a chance to review the agenda, hopefully. Any
Yes.
changes at all? We're okay with that to move forward? Okay. Next on the item is public comment, and I'm going to be pulling double duty here. I do see 1 hand raised, and that, or actually there are 2 hands raised. So I will do that. I'm going to be sharing my screen at the same time. I'm following similar protocols that we do at the board meeting. We limit it to 1 minute and 30 seconds, so I'll let the speakers know that. I'm going to share my screen, so I won't be able to see you guys. But I will start. Hang on, give me one quick second. Okay, I will start with Mr. Rafferty. Mr. Rafferty, if you could unmute.
Well, my first public comment is related to the roll call. And that is, while I am sure that Ms. Callaway, whom I have a very high personal regard for, would bring many skills to the commission, the fact is that she is not qualified by virtue of her election to a party central committee during the last 8 years. And I think it would be tragic to go through this process and to have someone who is unhappy with the results contest them by virtue of her participation. So I very reluctantly raised that issue that her credentials should be decided upon. I had tried to communicate this concern to the district beforehand and ascertained whether Judge Henderson was aware of the issue, but I think that needs to be resolved. And then I would continue on the issue of the agenda. I think the meeting should be called and organized by the commission itself, and there should be compliance with the Brown Act in terms of its electronic notice, which needs to be on the main page of a website and have an accurate date, not a date from last year. And also it should be physically posted. And I've been unable to determine where that occurred.
Next up is Ms. Linda Ruiz Lozito. Ms. Lozito, if you could unmute.
Hello, I was the plaintiff representing the Latino area for the Voting Rights Act lawsuit. So if I could be of any help, I've saved a lot of documentation from that. So if that is of any help, the purpose was that the California legislature passed the Voting Rights Act of 2001 after it was established that at-large elections diluted the vote of minorities. This became very political. The district school board basically agreed to our terms we offered in April. In March, almost a year later, and it was the same term. So it was just very political, and I felt it was really that they didn't want low-income minorities to have representation. And the Latino areas have been underrepresented for a long time, and these are the areas that have struggled academically. I'd love to send a map I made that shows where the schools overlay in the area. So if there's an email that would be good to send, that would be great. The final trustee area map was a collaborative effort with the district at a 4-hour meeting. And we basically followed the school boundaries and communities of interest, and also the Voting Rights Act law. So I'm hoping that this is great and this is followed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Lozito. All right, commissioners, on to the next item on that, and that's just a review of the Redistricting Commission's roles, purpose, process, and timeline. And for this, I'm actually going to turn this over to Jonathan Berry Smith, and he is going to present a presentation and kind of fill you guys in. Jonathan, let me know if you can share your screen. You should be. Would you like me to pull up the presentation, or do you want to go through it?
Yes, if you could pull it up, that would be very helpful.
Can I ask a procedural question? There was, I think Scott brought it up about Genoveva and for being elected to the DPCCC. Is this the time that since we're talking about roles and commissioners, is this the appropriate time? I would really hate for us to start this process and start rolling down the street, and then somebody stop the process because we've not followed. Specifically, I know I had to sign a special paper, and I think we all were supposed to sign a special paper. Could you fill us in, or can we get at least some advice or some information on that topic before we proceed?
Yeah, and I'm actually going to turn this over to the attorneys to handle that.
Sure, if I can jump in, I'm Harold Freeman. I work with Jonathan. And just really briefly to state our role, we are attorneys for West Contra Costa Unified School District. We've worked with the district for, in my case, decades. And so you will be talking later about the opportunity that you'll have to have your own independent counsel that you will be able to select yourselves. So for now, you know, the trick is always getting these things started. You have to come together to sort of organize it and move it forward. As far as the applications that were submitted, there was, through the settlement of the litigation that Ms. Ruiz-Lazito referenced, there was an agreement that a retired judge, Felton Henderson, highly respected, would be the one who would make the appointments. So the situation we're in procedurally, as I perceive it, is that this commission does not appoint nor remove members. That's really up to the appointment judge. Now that we're aware of Mr. Rafferty's concerns, we'll certainly take that up as appropriate with the district and with the attorney or with the judge, but I don't think there's anything that can be done with it tonight. I think the commitment would be to work this out and see if there is truly an issue there or anything needs to be done prior to your next meeting.
Thank you.
It'll be cleared up and Genoveva can stay.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to turn it now over to Jonathan after I start sharing my screen.
Thank you, Bobby. So, all right, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So, yeah, basically
just a quick thing. I'm Richie Cook, and my name doesn't have an E at the end.
Thank you.
We'll get that fixed.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're actually going to jump in. I think Jonathan and I are going to tag team this. So I'm going to do the first half. He's going to do the second half. We don't want to make this really long and belabored because, again, this is your meeting, not ours. And we just want to give you some basic information, and for those who may be watching at home, about how we got here, and then Jonathan will talk to you about some of the steps that will follow. I do want to note, you are, as far as we know, the first independent commission for redistricting for a school district in the history of the state of California. So that's a rather exciting moment and opportunity for all of you. I know the district is highly appreciative of your volunteering your time. And really what we want to do is set the stage for you here tonight so that increasingly, as Mr. Rafferty suggested, you will be the ones running your own meeting moving forward once we get through these introductory parts. So just, and I'm assuming that most of you are probably already aware of some of this, but again, in consistency with the Brown Act, we have folks at home watching. So just to make sure everybody has the context, there's generally speaking two types of elections in California. One is at large, where each trustee is elected by everybody within the district. That was the way that West Contra Costa did its elections for a very long time. What that means is if you have 5 trustees, everybody in the district gets to vote on those trustees, regardless of where the trustees live within the district and regardless of where the voters live. As we note here, that is subject to potential challenge under the California Voting Rights Act, or the CVRA. The CVRA is highly concerned that there is not an occurrence of what is referred to as racially polarized voting, where essentially certain population groups have their votes overwhelmed by others. And you have protected classes who are not able to get the candidate of their preference elected. And what the CVRA also talks about is the ability to move to what's known as trustee area elections. You'll hear it called sometimes district-based elections. We don't like to use that language because it's confusing for a school district. So we usually use by trustee area elections. And in that type of election, each trustee has to live in a designated area, and they are elected only by those who live in that area. So if you have 5 trustees, you would divide the district into 5 roughly equal parts based on population, not on land mass, but on population. So that's what you have under a by trustee area election. What happened in West Contra Costa was there was a challenge brought to the existing at-large elections. The school board did vote to commit to moving forward to by trustee area elections, but they did not do so within the timeline that the CVRA allowed them to avoid a legal challenge. And a legal challenge ensued. Ms. Ruiz-Luzito was the named plaintiff, and Ms. Ruiz-Luzito, it's good to see you again. It's been some time. And through that process, the district decided ultimately through a settlement that they would move to by trustee area elections to take effect for the 2020 election. And in another unprecedented move, as far as I know, the board agreed that all 5 seats would be up for election in 2020, which is unusual. This didn't get phased in over 2 elections as it typically would be, with 3 members in 1 election and then 2 years later, 2 members. All 5 were up in the 2020 election. So that's just a brief background of how we got here. If we could go to the next slide. So the question now is, why is the district revisiting its map at this point when it just adopted it for the 2020 elections so recently? And the answer is found in the education code for school districts that you are actually required after every decennial federal census. So in that 10-year census period, you are supposed to revisit your trustee area map to see if adjustments are necessary and to make those adjustments. This is applicable to other types of agencies too, under other code sections, but this is the one that applies to school districts. And the main purpose of this rebalancing that you do or revisiting is to make sure that the population balance of each trustee area is nearly equal to each of the other areas. There is a concept under federal law, you've all heard of before, of 1 person, 1 vote. If you start having one trustee area that has a significantly smaller population than another, you essentially are shifting the balance where a smaller group of people are allowed to elect 1 person and a larger number of people are required to elect somebody from another trustee area. So this is where you engage in the balancing. The rule of thumb under federal precedent is that each trustee area is supposed to be within no more than 5% greater or 5% less of the population balance of the other trustee areas. So a sort of a 10% swing. There's some exceptions that come along, but nothing we have to worry about tonight. So this is the time period now with the census data coming out for the map to be revisited. And it's important to acknowledge that the map that the district adopted and was worked out, as Ms. Ruiz-Luzito also commented on, was worked out between the parties in that litigation, including the school board. That was all based on census data that was then available from 2010. So even though you may not have experienced a huge amount of population shifting or population growth or new development, you may be left in a situation where over 10 years, things can change, populations can move. So this is the opportunity to take a look at that again. So we can go to the next slide. There's certain criteria. This is not something we're going to dive deeply into tonight. You will have opportunities with a demographer once you select one, and you will have an opportunity to do so at a future meeting. They will go into much greater detail with you with this, but when you draw maps, you can consider a number of different factors. The education code cited here is actually applicable to county boards of education, but the parties agreed under the settlement order and stipulation that they would use this as part of the criteria of what you can consider. And again, we won't go deeply into this tonight, but you get to consider things like topography. Do you have a mountain or a river or a levee that runs down the middle of a particular part of the district? That might be a logical way to divide things. You consider geography, this cohesiveness, contiguity, integrity, compactness, these different issues. A lot of that goes to not having gerrymandered spaces, where you've all heard about gerrymandering, where there's these spaghetti straps that stick out in different directions. and strings to capture particular populations. That's this compactness concept that they're supposed to have basically a logical and orderly boundary, if you will. And then communities of interest, which is always very important. That can mean a lot of different things. There's not a singular definition to it. It can be anything raising, going from little leagues to religious organizations to where people shop. It can be a very broad range. So again, these are things that you'll get to talk more and get input with the demographer on down the road. So we go to the next slide. So this really brings us now to the Redistricting Commission. Under California law, there's 3 different types of commissions that you can have when you go through a redistricting process every 10 years. One is basically just an advisory body where they help advise. Ultimately here it would be the school board, but the school board makes the decision. There's also what's known as a hybrid commission. A hybrid commission would recommend 2 or more maps to the board, and the school board would have to select among those maps. What the parties agreed to as part of the settlement of the litigation in this case is that they actually would have an independent commission, which is where you all come in. The concept of the independent commission is authorized in the elections code sections. You'll see there 23,000 et sec. And until fairly recently, just a few years ago, school districts didn't have the option by statute to have an independent commission. Only other types of local entities did. School districts were added just a few years ago, which is one of the reasons that there hasn't been one of these in the state before. And again, we believe that you are the first to be doing this for a school district. With an independent commission, you are actually empowered to adopt the map. It is not the school board that approves the map. It is you all. And the key to all of this is that word independence. You all know from the applications that you filled out, there was a host of criteria that you were expected to meet, all of which were basically geared, as you could tell, around making sure that you had not been actively politically involved, for example, with the school district. And there are other criteria that were laid out as well, so that the district is truly getting a cross-section from you all of views that are not influenced by the district or other particular political entities, that you are truly independent. The number of you that there are 7, 5 of whom represent particular areas, 2 of whom are from outside the district, both within the county, that was all part of the settlement. That was all something that the parties worked out and agreed to, which is why you're structured the way you're structured. That is not driven specifically by a statute. Ultimately, and Jonathan will take you through some of the process that will get you there, what you will be doing is adopting a map for the district boundaries for its 2022 board election. And those are going to remain the boundaries up to and including the 2030 board election. So that's a significant number of elections and really demonstrates again the importance and the significance of the work that you all are doing. And again, Jonathan, I'll talk to you more about process just after I finish up a few other slides with you. So if we can go to the next slide, we just wanted to show you the map that is currently in place. This is, what is controlling right now for the current trustee area. This was the result of the lengthy process, public hearings, input, negotiations between the parties to litigation, resulted in this map that again has 5 trustee areas that are of roughly similar populations. And we put some data in here for you to see total population. And again, remember that you're looking at outdated numbers here. These are from the 2010 census. So this will change with the 2020 census. Total population about 235,000 people. When you just look district-wide, the population is 34% Hispanic, 24% white, 19% Black, and 20% Asian. And I want to hesitate here for a moment and just explain, we don't always use the most politically correct terms for particular groups. We borrow from what is actually laid out in the census data that we're working from. So I apologize if the wording is not the most current wording on all of this. We also look at citizens of voting age. It's typically by demographers would be called CVAP, citizens of voting age population, which is the critical component we really look at when we're balancing, because these are the people that are going to be voting when you're actually creating a map. And there you'll see the numbers of CVAP Hispanic is 22%, pretty significantly lower in 2010 than it was for total population. White is 32%, Black is 21%, and Asian is 23%. So you can see based on 2010 data that the white voting population had relatively greater strength than the actual population. And you may see some of that reflected in shifts that have happened when you get the new data for 2020. So if we can go to the next map. For each trustee area that was created, here you see area 1, the effort was made to basically have particular trustee areas that had a stronger voting population from particular groups. So you'll see here in trustee area 1, there's a significant Asian population, 35% with CVAP of 36%. This became the area that was the greatest representative of the Asian voting population. And again, if you look back at the numbers, the total population of the district was 20%. So it was a significant increase in the voting power of the Asian Pacific Islander voting population, if you will. You can go to area 2, please. In area 2, you can see where the significant shift is now. We have a Hispanic population in this area of 46% and CVAP of 25% compared to the district-wide populations of 34 and 22. So it's a little bit higher. But when you look at the Black or African-American population, now it's 35% with a CVAP that's very high, actually, of 44%. When you compare that to the total district population, those numbers were 19% and CVAP was 21%. So you see area 2 was an area where the Black population was given a stronger voting ability. And so you see that characteristic for each area. And then just briefly on the other areas in area 3, if we go to the next one. Again, you'll see, a really significant jump up now in the Hispanic population at 67% and CVAP at 49%, much higher than the district-wide populations. So you can start to see how each trustee area was crafted to increase the voting influence of particular populations. Trustee area 3 would be the Hispanic population. So if we go to 4, here you see a more balanced, if you look through the population here, it's pretty evenly split. So it's actually remarkably close on total population. But under CVAP, you'll see that the voting group that is the largest is white. So again, sort of following the pattern of the other groups we've had. And then if we could go to the last one, trustee area 5. Oh, here it comes, the drama, it's going slowly. So in trustee area 5, now you see that the white population jumps up even more. So you have a more predominant white voting population in trustee area 5. So you can kind of see how the district was divided up, and some of the shapes of these areas are elongated. Trustee area 5 is elongated, trustee area 2 is elongated. Sometimes that does happen to some extent in order to be able to have, again, an influence given to particular voting blocks in the strength of their ability to vote. So what that tells you is a little bit of history and just background, again, almost more for people at home, because I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this on the commission. What we're going to do now is Jonathan's going to take you through, now that we understand how we got here, where it is we're going, and what the process is going to be for that.
Right. Yes, thank you, Harold. So I'm going to review the process, and just briefly, the commission's process is dictated by the following. There's the elections code, section 2300 et sec, that Harold had mentioned previously. The stipulation and judgment in the Rosito case. I believe the Redistricting Commission website has a link to that stipulation and judgment. But if any of you have questions about that, we are able to answer them. And finally, the commission is dictated by whatever local procedures that you as a commission members adopt that are consistent with the elections code and the stipulation and judgment. So moving forward to the next slide. more of the process, and this is sort of getting into the nitty gritty of what steps need to be taken. So within 60 days of the appointment, the commission shall adopt a budget, which will go to the board's approval. As you have noticed in the agenda, one of the discussions is about a potential budget, which you'll be able to discuss further when we get to that point. The commission will have to hold 5 public hearings, 1 in each trustee area. And this is an opportunity for the residents to comment on the drawing of these district boundary lines and just to promote public participation and make sure that the constituencies that Harold discussed in these former maps have the chance to have their voices heard on the maps, on the drawing of the lines that the commission will be, that the commission is tasked in accomplishing. And so after these public hearings, the commission's demographer will prepare a preliminary trustee map and an accompanying report to file with the district superintendent by October 1. There's an asterisk there because this October 1 date, it was contemplated by the parties in that stipulation and judgment. This happened prior to the pandemic, and in normal years, the census, the 2020 census data would have been released somewhere around March or April. Unfortunately, there have been many delays, and the release of the 2020 census data isn't expected until the end of September. It might not be publicly available until October or after October. So this deadline or this timeline of October 1 will likely need to be discussed. But going back to the third bullet point, with the demographer's help, the commission will be tasked with preparing not only a map, but an accompanying report. And this report is basically an opportunity for the commission to explain why they made certain changes in the map or why they decided upon certain boundary lines, whether it's topography based, like a river or a mountain, or if it's based off of communities of interest or geography. This is something that is in line with the commission's role being transparent. This information will be available and open for the public to view. But this is just something to keep in mind as the commission begins discussing the maps, how they want to draw the lines, and what they are interested in considering in these maps. If you can move on to the next slide. There's a little more process that I just wanted to briefly touch on. There will then be at least 3 further public hearings on this initial preliminary trustee map and the report. There's nothing in the stipulation or the elections code that states where these meetings must be. It's not like the other 5 that must be held, 1 in each trustee area. But this is just further opportunity for the public to provide their input and discuss their suggestions or ask their questions. And this is information that the commission can take into account when preparing their next map. So the second bullet point kind of discusses a new quote unquote recommended trustee map, which they will then file with the district superintendent by January 1. District superintendent will publish this map, make it available. And this is to allow, once again, public participation, promote transparency, because then finally the district governing board will hold at least 1 public hearing on this recommended map. And after this final board hearing, the commission has the opportunity to either revise the map before adopting or just adopt as is. And this final adopted map is the final goal of the Redistricting Commission. This map, as Harold mentioned previously, would be in effect up to and through the 2030 governing board election. So moving on to the next slide. I just wanted to briefly touch on some of the transparency requirements of the Redistricting Commission. So future meetings should be open, transparent process, the commission should conduct an open and transparent process that ensures meaningful public participation. Later this evening, the commission will have an opportunity to adopt procedures to ensure that any communication received from the governing board or incumbent trustees is reduced to writing and posted on the internet for the public to view. And for these public hearings that I discussed that the commission will have to go through soon, the commission should afford maximum public access to these proceedings. So think about when you want the meetings to be held, hopefully at a time that's accessible to most people. With the pandemic, the location aspect, at least as of now, the commission meetings will likely be virtual, but if things change and we have in-person meetings, then thinking about the locations of those meetings to be in a place that's accessible for the public to attend. And also making sure that future public hearings, there's notice that these meetings will be translated in Spanish. And finally, commission members are subject to the district's conflict of interest code. I believe this was provided to each applicant, and I believe applicants had to sign that they acknowledged and understood that they would be subject to a conflict of interest code. And moving on to the next slide, I think I want to briefly touch on the Brown Act. And just very quickly, the Brown Act is California's open meeting law. It's a very complex, thorough body of law, and this slide does not mean to summarize all of it. We just wanted to touch upon a few basic points that the commission should be aware of in conducting its business moving forward. And of course, if anyone has questions about the Brown Act or wants further information on some of its other requirements, we can help arrange that. But as this meeting is, all meetings must be public with notice and an agenda. A quorum of commission members are not allowed to discuss commission business outside of a noticed public meeting. This is basically saying that a group of more than half of the commission members can't come together to basically have their own meeting without it being noticed, open to the public, and with an agenda of what's happening at that meeting. And we add this caveat that this meeting requirement also applies to communications such as email and social media. But of course, if commission members have any questions about how to make sure they're complying with the Brown Act, we can definitely help with that. And moving to the next slide, we just wanted to highlight a few of the main steps in the timeline and next steps moving forward. So tonight, the goal, of course, is to just get the commission together, to meet each other, to kind of understand what the commission's role and purpose is. But we will have opportunities soon this evening, coming up right after this presentation, for the commission to adopt a proposed budget and have the opportunity to adopt a process for how it wants to hire or go about hiring its special legal counsel and its demographer to help it through this process. And likewise, similarly, at a future meeting, the commission will have an opportunity to not only appoint a commission chair, if it wants to, it also will have the opportunity to interview this legal counsel and demographer based off of who ends up applying for that role. As mentioned previously, this October 1 date is, at least based off of the stipulation, the date that the commission needs to have not only gone through 5 public hearings throughout the district, but also file its first trustee map and preliminary plan with the superintendent. Based off of the delay in the census data, this deadline is difficult and will likely need to be changed. And around October is also the time when the public will likely have the chance to review the 2020 census data. By January 1, that is the date that I mentioned previously, of when the new recommended map and plan is filed with the superintendent. And further down the line, and I think this is encompassed with what I've already just said, the commission will be holding public hearings that will hopefully aim to adopt its final map around February of 2022. And the reason why we say February and not July is July, even though statutorily is the deadline for the registrar of voter, well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't phrase it that way. Basically, the map that the commission ends up finally adopting, the registrar of voters will need time to implement those map boundaries so that they can be effective by the November governing board elections of 2022. And so having the map finalized and sent to the registrar of voters by around February of 2022 will allow ample time for that process. And I believe the next slide is an opportunity for questions. And so I think if anyone has any questions, if there's a way for commission members to either raise their hands or just ask away, we'll do our best to answer. And if we can't answer them, we'll look into them and hopefully have an answer to you by the next meeting.
This is Genoveva. Will the recording have the PowerPoint that was presented today? Bobby?
Yes, and I will attach this to the agenda as well too.
Okay.
There's another, hate to be this is my job when I was volunteering for some things, to keep an eye on the question and answer. So it's kind of rubbed off. And again, we have another Q&A proposed by Linda Ruiz-Lazido. I hope I said your name correct, Linda. It says 90 seconds for public comment does not really allow for public participation. Typically 3 minutes is allowed for public comment. Unless there are many speakers, then usually 2 minutes is allowed. So is there anything that says we have to adopt the policy of the current board, the West Contra, to the time limit, or do we get to set our own?
If I could weigh in on that, you are able as an independent commission to do this however you would like to do it. Tonight, we're just sort of defaulting to what the district usually does, but our thought is that at your next meeting, you can certainly discuss tonight procedures you'd like to see. It's not on the agenda to adopt them, so it'll take a little time to write them up. But at your next meeting, you can actually adopt what process you want to use. And if you want to make those time periods longer, that's fine.
Right. And you talked about possibly a chair and a co-chairs or vice chair. Or would that be our legal counsel, or would there be a chair that was directly a commissioner?
Yeah, that's what we've envisioned, is that you will select for yourselves amongst yourselves a chair. There'll also be opportunities to think about, do you want to have a vice chair in case the chair can't make a meeting? You'll also have opportunities to think about, do you want to have a secretary, to have somebody who's designated as a lead note taker, the person who may take the lead on writing the report when you have your map done to explain what the basis was it. But it's really at your pleasure. Those would be the three offices we might envision, but you may even have others in mind.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. So how is the commission staffed? So if we have requests for information, who do we get that information from, or how do we go about making those requests?
Bobby, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, those kinds of requests would come through me. But if you guys need things, let me know. We'll talk about later, like, your meeting schedules and all that. So all of that will go through me. Once you decide your schedules, when you want to meet, where you want to meet, that'll be tasked to me in my department to make sure it gets up on the website in a timely manner, form the agenda, those kinds of things.
Any other last minute questions?
I'm curious as to how you know, I've never hired a demographer before, or actually, I've never even hired a lawyer before. So I'm not in a position to really know how to interview people for that kind of work. All I could do is go off of recommendations of other people. So.
Yeah, I think that will be discussed more on the agenda later. But I would just observe, you know, what, again, to try to help get things going, we've helped with some basic criteria that you can consider that has to do with how much work of, you know, for school districts have they done, et cetera. We and staff can certainly help with crafting some questions when it comes to interviews if you get to that point. So we won't, you won't be left to create this as you go. There'll be resources for you to help walk you through how to do this. There are demographers in the state that really specialize in this type of work, and they're not universal. You know, there's only so many that know what they're doing here. And we also included as part of the criteria that we've suggested and that the board supports, that this not be an attorney and it not be a demographer who's done work for the school district before, who was involved with the prior litigation. So you're truly getting a fresh set of eyes. So, you know, realistically, it's going to limit the universe of how many people are out there that have that kind of experience and have never worked for a district as prominent and large as West Contra Costa.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
One more logistical question. So in terms of the commission, all of our meetings, the entirety of the meetings are open to the public, like there's no executive session of these meetings or closed session of these meetings?
Yeah, that when eventually down the road, you'll have an independent counsel that you can ask that question to. My general observation is that the purpose of closed session generally won't apply for you. If somebody were to sue the commission, then there might be a basis to go into closed session, for example, but you're not going to be engaged in labor negotiations. A lot of the exceptions won't apply. But again, eventually down the road, you'll have your own legal counsel that you'll get to ask those questions of.
Brown Act basically has about 7 items that you can do in closed session. And so if those come up, then I imagine we will have closed session, but if those items do not come up, then everything we do should be in the public domain.
Back to the public comment time period question. I noticed Ms. Ruiz Lozito put in another comment saying that typically at West Contra Costa board meetings, the public comment period is 3 minutes, which is, I know, is standard for public meetings. How do we determine the 90-second limit for tonight? And is there a reason we can't at this point, just if she or anyone else from the public wants to extend their comments, to like give them full 3 minutes if that's the standard?
The new board has put that into place at the current board meeting. So since December, I believe it is, they've been instituting that 1.5 minutes. Again, as Mr. Freeman and Mr. Barry Smith said, you guys are, you know, your own independent commission. So it's up to you guys to determine how long you would like to have public comment.
And when it comes to a proposal, Bobby, sorry to interrupt, but when it comes to a proposal like that, as members of the independent commission, can each of us request a vote on something like that? Or just suggest, hey, let's extend the public comment time to 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then see how the other commissioners feel about it? This is kind of new. So what would the proper procedure be for something like that?
So Derek, that's a great question. So what I'm looking at is our agenda item, and we're on item 5, and we're able to talk about the process. So at this point in time, I do believe, as it is agendized and it has been published ahead of time and met the Brown Act, that we can discuss a process that we want. And if part of that process is the time limit we want to set on public comment, I believe that we could, with consensus, it wouldn't be voting because it doesn't look like it's agended for a decision, but in a general consensus, we can see if there is a consensus to extend they gave us a process because we're starting from scratch, and we can see if there is consensus to possibly go back to the routine of 3 minutes. If we'd like to proceed on that. One of the things that, oh gosh, I have to say, you guys, I was on a school board, Martinez Unified for 15 years, and the community college board for 8 years, been president many times. So one of the things that I would do for consensus is to use the thumbs up, if you're abstaining, cross, and if you're no, thumbs down, just to kind of get a general idea of what direction we were going in. If you're comfortable with using the thumbs up for direction, I guess, as a board, and I would like to check both with our legal if this sounds like we're within our purview, then we could probably do that right now as we're discussing our process.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem with that. I think once you have a chair and we have things agendized for action, it'll be more formal, but what you just described makes perfect sense.
I think the issue of public comment time would be something good for us to address. Set some parameters for right now as we move forward. It seems like a very simple thing to start with. I believe that personally, and I'm curious what other commission members think, but I think we should adhere to the traditional 3-minute time limit. If we have future meetings where there's a significant number of public comment or time concerns, we could amend that, which typically happens in public meetings when there are a lot of public comment. But I would recommend that we set a 3-minute time limit for public comment. And if others agree, I would be open to allowing the folks who commented previously for 90 seconds tonight to have an additional 90 seconds if they like it.
Craig, I'm in agreement with your statement, so I'm a thumbs up with that process, decision, and direction.
I'm in agreement also, but I think we should have a total time limit. Either 30 minutes or an hour, whatever we decide to agree on for public comment. And once we know how many speakers there'll be, then we can revise downward from the 3 minutes.
I like the addition. We had a 3-minute time limit on most of my board meetings and a 30-minute total time. And if we, then we would ask people in the audience, if you're here with a certain person, to stand up. Of course, we're now Zoom, but so we'll have to figure out some other way to see if people are in agreement with somebody speaking. And then at the end of our meeting, when we had more time, we would then put public speaking back on and would allow people to continue the public comments.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I think we should do that here for the people who made public comment earlier, to grant them an additional 90 seconds at the end of the meeting to discuss any points that they feel need to be discussed with the commission.
And this kind of I agree too.
James, how are you feeling about that? And Omar?
Yeah, I think if we don't have a lot of speakers, then we should allow the speakers to convey their voice with the appropriate amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think the intention is to be highly inclusive and highly transparent. So I don't suspect that we'll need to have a limit to public comment within reason, of course, but we definitely should give folks the chance to have kind of committed and invested time to inform our decision. We definitely should hear them.
So it looks like we have consensus, and we do have another comment. There's normally a separate opportunity to comment on each agenda item before something is taken. And I believe that that will probably be part of our process as well, comment on it. And again, 3 minutes is the normal. And again, a time limit on the agenda item, unless we have a public hearing. At that point in time, the public hearing takes precedent and has its own stipulations that we have to follow at that time. So that sounds like we've reached our first consensus as a commission. I'm very proud of us all. So at this time, Bobby, did you want to take it back over and see if either Scott or Linda want to readdress the board with a minute and a half that they have?
Yeah, and I was actually going to ask if you wanted to have public comment on this item, so that segues right into the next one. If so, if I understood correctly, you would like that at 3 minutes too, correct?
Correct. I believe.
Okay. So it looks like there is one public comment. Let me just switch timers real quick. So give me a quick second. Okay, so commissioners, I see 2 hands raised. The first again is Ms. Linda Ruiz Lizito. Ms. Ruiz Lizito, can you unmute?
Thank you very much for allowing 3 minutes for public comment. I've never been at a district meeting, only once where there were only 90 seconds allowed. So I really appreciate that. It allows more for public interaction, and that's what we really want. My original notes were about 2 minutes, so I feel I was a jumbled mess. Again, the communities of interest, our interpretation was the school boundaries. And when we met with the district and district staff, they had met with a lot of different school areas, and the communities of interest, the school communities very much wanted to be put together, not by, I heard things like to put them together by baseball league or something. So I'm hoping it's the community of interest, it's considered by school boundaries. But thank you very much. And thank you for volunteering for this and putting your time into this. Bye.
Apologies. Next, Mr. Scott Rafferty, you can unmute.
Okay, I assume there'll be opportunities to comment later in the meeting about the other specific agenda items, so I'll keep this relatively short. Regarding the presentation that you just had, there are many things that I agree with it. It did focus on state law, and this case is pretty unique in that the district actually stipulated that had we proceeded to trial, they would have been found in violation of Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. And federal law, of course, is primary, and that, in my view, governs how you should approach this. It is one reason why the stipulation sets forth in some detail the priority of considerations that you have. I frankly don't think you have any reason to look at the education code at this point. It does incorporate parts of 23003 regarding independent commissions. It modifies other parts and it excludes other parts. So I think the priority here should be the federal case law, of course, and the stipulation, and then the provisions of the elections code that are incorporated therein. I hope that simplifies matters, because it should. As to your attorney, I guess we can discuss this later. There's reference to someone who works with school districts. I realize that Mr. Freeman was not really involved in the negotiations over the settlement, which was done by a separate attorney. I don't think he fully appreciates how severe the ex parte restriction is. That's going to take an attorney with a lot of experience in administrative law and in transparency and in public records and beyond just the Brown Act. So I hope that skill set is sought when you look at that. Again, I'll shorten my further comments on the attorney, but while the clock is running, I think the two roles of the attorney are transparency and consulting you during the meetings, and finally, writing that report that justifies that the final map or the proposal to the board each comply with federal law. So that's the skill set you're looking for. It might actually be two different attorneys, but you don't need to worry about litigation. That's really a separate stage. That shouldn't be part of your budget. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. I would like to kick it back over to the commissioners if you guys have any more questions or discussion.
I'm not sure what part of the meeting we want to just introduce ourselves, as all of us don't really know some of us don't know each other. I don't think any of you know me. I don't know any of you. So I think it would be productive if we could each kind of introduce ourselves and our background and what brought us here.
Again, this is your guys' commission, so I will let you take it where you want. Would you like to take that up? I know it's not agendized, but would you like to take that opportunity to do it now, or do you want to do that at the end?
I'd like to do it now, if I may say so. I missed it in the beginning because I was hoping we were going to have introductions, but we didn't because we really don't know each other. And also, can you put the agenda back on the share screen or something? Because it's no longer on the link that we got. It says to me it's been removed. So I'm not seeing the agenda, and I did not print it.
It was moved. I had to go around. We have our own page now, and you have to get to that page, Genoveva, and then you click on a different agenda, and it will show up.
Okay, well, can we
I
just...
have the link here. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
If everyone's agreeable doing introductions, might I suggest we start with the individual district representatives, go 1 through 5, and then the two at large out of district representatives.
So District 1, who's representing District 1?
Sure, I'll go. Greetings, everyone. My name is Omar Butler, resident of District Area 1. I have 2 young children who attend elementary school in that district as well, a 2nd grader and a 4th grader. During the day, I am the CEO of a nonprofit working to connect young people with opportunities to create career pathways for themselves. And what drew me to this work is just my commitment to equity and voice, particularly for those who are underrepresented in spaces like this. So it's great to meet you all and great to be a part of this process.
Area 2.
Thank you. My name is Richie Cook. I worked in West Contra Costa Unified School District for 32 years. I'm retired now. I was both a bilingual teacher and a band teacher, primarily at elementary, and I did do a few years at Helms too. I have 2 grandkids, 2 twins, the most different looking twins you've ever seen. One's kind of chubby and active, and he's very light. And my granddaughter is real active also. That's probably the one thing where they're the same. She's very dark and a real pleasure also. But people will be surprised when they see them, and they're known as the twins. So, and I'm in Area 2, which is the Iron Triangle. And I'm very happy to be able to serve the community in this way. Thank you.
I'm Genoveva Callaway, Area Trust 3. I've been in San Pablo for the past 50 years, originally from El Paso, Texas. My children, my grandchildren, and now my great-granddaughter is attending Downer Elementary School in my neighborhood. So I'm a real advocate for all children through all those years. And then I was in elected office for the City of San Pablo for 16 years. And in the process, I also say through my leadership and other council members, we implemented programs in our schools. Before then, the school jurisdiction and the city would not join together. There's two different jurisdictions. It's none of our business, the council. But we're now in our schools, in our 5 elementary schools, doing communities and schools programming, which the City of San Pablo contributes a lot of money to it, and we're doing a really good partnership. So I'm all for partnerships. I'm all for collaborations, because nobody can, help with our children or alone. It takes everybody in the community to work together. So that's why I'm here.
Yes, my name is James Tualo. I represent Area 4. I work as a field technician for a company that's based in Oregon, but the company customer actually all over the world. So I have coworker that based in the Bay Area, and when the company has projects, we are sent to the customers of the company. I have one child who is a first grader right now, moving to second grade next year. And I was working for Census 2000 as enumerator. So I had opportunity to see actually a lot of neighborhoods in Richmond, San Pablo, El Sobrante. So if not because of that job, I would not learn more about community, how different. Sometimes I was sent to a area where the residents consider a high income group. And another day I was sent to area where residents consider low income group. So I can see a lot of diverse in terms of income group residents in this area. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Derek Hilliard. I am the commissioner for Area 5, and I grew up in West Contra Costa Unified School District schools. I've lived in several of the trustee areas, from North Richmond to San Pablo to Richmond Annex to El Cerrito currently. And so I know the people in the communities within our district very well. And I joined this commission to do my part to make sure that the trustee areas are drawn equitably and fair for the people within our district, and that we take account of all the diversity and all the richness of the people that we live with. My day-to-day, I work as an attorney. So I hope I can, use my knowledge, skills, and experience to help us make some good decisions. And I look forward to working with each of you. Thanks.
Now we're at large. Craig, did you want to go first?
Sure, Vicki, thanks. My name is Craig Lazaretti. I live in Martinez, but I grew up in West Contra Costa. I went to school in West Contra Costa, K through 12, Valley View, Juan Crespi, and graduated from Pinole Valley High School. And then I went on to Contra Costa College for a couple of years, and I pursued a journalism career. After graduating from San Francisco State, I spent about 25 years with the East Bay Times and its previous iterations, the Contra Costa Times, West County Times, etc. So I had a lot of experience over the years in the news coverage of the school district. And I left the daily newspaper business in 2018 I wanted to freelance work for a couple years, including doing some contract writing work for the school district. The former communications director, Marcus Walton, was a high school classmate of mine back in the 1980s at Pinole Valley. He's now over at the County Office of Education, but I got to work with him and Bobby a bit. Bobby and I were colleagues years ago at the Contra Costa Times. And yeah, I'm very excited. I've been active in my own school district, Martinez Unified, the last several years. Parent of 2 children, one graduated from high school last year, another who is just finished their junior year in high school. So I've been engaged in school district and educational issues with them, and very interested in topics around student safety, student welfare, and it's great to have an opportunity to work on creating these trustee maps and give back to the school district that produced me in the community where I grew up. The diversity and richness of the West Contra Costa community had a huge impact, a huge positive impact on my life. And I'm looking forward to playing the best role I can and hoping to create a map that is equitable and representative of this dynamic and diverse community. So, thank you. I look forward to working with all of you.
And I'm Vicki Gordon, and I'm a lifetime educator, teacher, classroom teacher, 4th grade, 3rd, 4th grade, and then moved into middle school before I took some time off and stay home with my 2 young kids. And instead of going back into the classroom, I ended up on Martinez Unified School District's board for 15 years. The natural progression for me and loving education and students was to run for the community college board. I did that for 8 years, and part of Contra Costa College, my ward overlapped. So I know about board members, I know about school districts, I know about area wards. So I felt that this was a wonderful fit. I also, last year at this time, when I was still on my community college board, I volunteered for a very important role at the state level, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion State Task Force. I'm still serving on that. We just had a meeting this morning. And again, another very important thing. So I felt this would be a very good fit for me and a way to give back to the community. Thank you. And I look forward to working with every one of you. And I am, again, I'm so proud that we've already come to consensus on a lot of things. So this looks like a very positive start for our commission.
Indeed, nice to meet everyone. Again, thank you for your service. I know this is a love of all things. So thank you so much. Shall we move to the next agenda item? And I think we've touched on it a little bit. It is a discussion regarding commissions, organizations, and procedures. And what I'd like to do is kind of bring up slide 16 from the previous presentation, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Sure.
Okay, so since I'm sharing screen, I can only see a few of you at a time, so forgive me. Let me try to move the other way. Yeah, so what this brings up, and Jonathan touched on it briefly, is just a procedure about to ensure that any communication you guys receive from any incumbent trustees is in writing and is posted on the internet. So to help with that, I believe all of you received an email from myself letting you know that we've set up email accounts for you guys. And apologies, I didn't explain it clearly. That is an actual Gmail account and it's not through our website. So if you go to Gmail and then try to log in using that username, that temporary password, and then you could change it to any others. We thought that would be a good idea for you guys to use, for any redistricting commission business. And as the attorneys had mentioned earlier, if you do get communications from our board, to do it through there, to do it in writing. And then we're suggesting that, for a procedure, and this is up to you guys to kind of come to a consensus on, just how you want to go about doing that. How are you going to notify? Will you send it to me? Just kind of those kind of procedural things. You've already kind of covered public comment. I've heard, a chair kind of recommended and a co-chair. So I don't know if these are some of the items that you guys would like to discuss now. But I'll leave it there and I'll open it up. And do you want me to leave the slide up or would you like me to take it down?
Can you leave it up, please?
Yeah, leave it up.
So how do you all feel about having a chair and a vice chair?
That's
That's
a
a
good
good
idea.
I
I
think
would
it's
like to-
Agreed.
I would like to suggest Vicki and Derek, if they're willing to take on this role. Or roles, excuse me.
Second,
Do we have a suggestion for who would be the chair versus, I think my own opinion is that it would be best if the chair was one of the representatives from one of the districts currently. But that's just a thought. I think having Vicki's experience on boards and how boards operate and how public meetings operate is going to be very important. So I definitely like having her in one of those positions. And I think Derek's legal background is going to be quite valuable. So I think that's a good idea. Just a matter of how folks feel about appointing a chair and who should be the chair and vice chair.
This is Genoveva, and I think I'd like to have an at-large, in this case, Vicki, be the chair, only because then, she's more neutral. When you're a chair, you tend to want to advocate for your own district, kind of automatically. So that would take that away. And Derek, with his legal background, would be great as vice chair.
Not really sure. Derek, what's your background as far as commissions and chairing meetings, I guess? Do you have background in that?
This is my first time being on a commission.
How about I don't know, an HOA or anything like that?
I've done a lot of, when I was in college, I did a lot of student organizations. In law school, I was the advocacy director. So I'm used to leading meetings. However, I just personally, from seeing Vicki in this meeting, I think I would put my weight behind her as the chair. She seems to have a tremendous wealth of experience, and I'd be glad to serve in any capacity that the board would have me, or that the commission would have me.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of, Richmond City Council is an excellent example of an institution that could use a parliamentarian. Yeah, I think Vicki would do a wonderful job as chair. And I'm sure you would be an excellent vice chair. So I'd be very happy if both of you would serve in that way. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you. I'm happy to accept, but Derek, I think you have a lot of natural talent too, and I don't want to sell you short. So, but if everyone's comfortable with my being the chair, I will gratefully and humbly accept. Thank you.
Everyone in agreement?
I accept as vice chair.
Okay, we've got consensus.
Nice.
That is something else. Do we want to do things pretty much on a consensus basis? Is when we make decisions?
Well, what we need to do is to have an agenda that reflects action items before we can take action. The reason we're only taking consensus tonight is because we really haven't listed very many action items. We have things down for discussion and possible, what was the word? Possible
Adoption.
Yeah, possible.
adoption.
So we really don't have any action items listed on our agenda, which is next time when we do an agenda, I would recommend that we really have items listed under action and discussion and separate the two, because that's a normal thing that most boards do.
Mhm.
But at this time, we're just, we were setting up the organization, we were meeting one another, and I think we've really, in my humble opinion and my, 20 some odd plus years, really are coming together quite nicely. It's a great group to work with. You guys, I'm very honored to be a part of such a wonderful group of, an intelligent group of people, community members who truly care. So we're doing really well so far. But as far as the meeting's concerned, I think at this point in time, we're going to have to continue with consensus and then look at the things they want us to adopt, and through consensus, we can adopt them, or we can put them on agenda for next time for action or a further discussion. If that makes sense to you.
If I may just weigh in on one procedural issue, we did intend that where the agenda shows possible adoption, that is action. We didn't make it too formal. We didn't call it action, but I think that conveys adequately the action. And the reason I wanted to mention that is that there is a timeline on the adoption of the proposed budget. So that is something we are actually looking for a vote and formal action on tonight. But other than those two items that are listed as adoption, all the rest truly were for discussion tonight.
Makes sense. So are there any other comments? Is there public comment on our, I guess we're on the discussion of regarding commission's organization and procedures. So item 6, is there public comment at this time? Are there any hands raised? I can't see from my.
Yes, Vicki, I believe it's two hand raised. Scott Rafferty and Linda Ruiz Lozito. So
Okay.
let me, 1 second.
Well, I had been concerned about the public notice for this meeting, and I'll tell you why. I was just really impressed by the extraordinary job that Judge Henderson did in collecting such a diverse and strong group of people. I really was moved by each of your biographies, and I particularly want to point out Omar's mention of equity and participation. I've done several more of these in the past 2 years since this case, and what has become important to me is to draw maps of important demographics of need, not just race, but education, income, number of children, people born overseas, language, limited English, and to really look at those as informing the community of interest at the onset. And I also have to say, Richie Cook's mention of the Richmond City Council as a good example of ways to maybe do things differently than really brought back some not entirely pleasant memories of working with that group. So you really have, you certainly won my respect and admiration, and I think you'll do an excellent job. Regarding the time frame, I was very concerned to hear the suggestion that there has to be an adoption of a budget tonight. There is a problem that the district promised Judge Henderson. It urged him not to make the notifications himself because they would do so within a week, and then they waited a month. And that was not a good idea. And it is true that this meeting was supposed to happen within 60 days, but the solution is not to rush things through without adequate study and opportunity for public comment. Finally, I want to say a word about Judge Henderson. There was some implication in the written materials that he was more or less on call to you. It's not entirely true. He can be at his option, get involved in issues, but the stipulation specifically says that he will seek agreement of the parties, and by which he means the district and Ms. Lozito. So I hope he's a resource, and hopefully we can resolve the issue regarding Ms. Callaway, because she would, if she were eligible, bring a lot to this session or to this group. And frankly, it wasn't my choice that we incorporate all those requirements, but I'm not sure what we can do now. Thank you.
Linda, did you have a public comment on this item?
I didn't really have another comment on this issue. I guess my hand didn't go down last time I raised it. But thank you. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you very much.
So that ends our discussion regarding the commission's organizations and procedures. So I guess that moves us on to item 7, discussion and potential adoption of proposed budget. And for commission's operations, if you go to your agenda that was provided, their proposed budget is underlined and there is a link to a proposed budget, or we can pull that up. Bobby, can we pull that up? There it is. And is there a report that goes along with this?
There is not, but I can briefly fill you in. So the school district board had a request about special counsel and demographer services, and they met and they set parameters of those 2 special items. Those were the cost not to exceed. And then the last portion is from my department and what my former predecessor used in terms of outreach. You know, I tell everyone he went anywhere and everywhere to get the maps out there. And if the commission chooses to do a similar tactics, it would cost roughly that much. And most of that is printing for proposed maps and whatnot to show at various community meetings. And then I don't know if Mr. Freeman or Mr. Barry Smith have anything to add.
I can briefly add the demographer estimate was just, we reached out to demographers and asked if they were to go through this process around how much it would cost for them to do so. That's how we ended up with the $85,000 amount. The $75,000 amount, we estimated how much time attorneys would spend, you know, use the blended rate of associates and partners and equity partners, et cetera, and kind of estimated that amount. But as is mentioned on this budget, it's a proposed budget. These are estimates. The commission is independent and gets to decide what it wants to do. And Bobby mentioned there are the parameters, but that's just the brief overview of how those numbers came to be.
Thank you. Questions, comments from commissioners?
One question that comes to mind is, if we adopt this budget tonight and it turns out that we don't believe these amounts are sufficient, what kind of flexibility do we have to go back and amend the budget or raise the totals in some of these areas if we feel that's necessary?
Good question. Is there someone who would like to answer?
If I can take a shot at that. You know, the agreement that forms the part of the stipulation just says that a budget has to be adopted by you know, a particular time. It doesn't go into detail on exactly what that looks like. Ultimately, these are public funds, and ultimately it's the board that will approve the payment of the funds. It's your budget, but it's coming out of the district's funds. We did try to build cushion into the numbers that you see here for the budget. So the 75,000, for example, for legal counsel, we would expect that that would be a not to exceed and unlikely to be reached. So we tried to put in some cushion. But all of that said, if once you interview and pick somebody and get potentially a different estimate from them, have other information, I'm sure the board will be willing to listen and cooperate to make sure that this moves forward in the way that it needs to.
Could we, when we interview, could we ask for a potential cost analysis from the potential legal counsel and demographers? Is that possible?
I think that's a good idea. Yes.
I agree. I think we should request bids regarding the respective services, because I know from my experience in private law that there are various types of law firm structures. Sometimes you're getting one attorney, sometimes you're getting two, sometimes you're getting 10. And it helps to just have some clarification as to the law firm or solo practitioner, whoever we go with, just who's going to be working on matters relating to the Redistricting Commission and how they would expect that work to be allocated.
Excellent.
And for me, excuse me, Vicki, for me, I'm more interested in learning about what that type of attorneys or demographers, what they do. So then we'll have an idea as to what are we asking for? Are we asking for, they're going to be working 10 hours a week, 1 hour? But I need to know, so I need, if someone could send me or send us articles about what they do, that profession, that specialty, then I'll inform myself and I can make a better decision.
When we do a request for proposals or an RFP, we can stipulate that not only can they put in the costs, but also you put in your request, Genoveva.
Yeah, no, I want the request before that because I don't want to be dependent on the bidders to educate me. No, of course they're gonna, whatever, well, they're marketing themselves. No, I want an independent, whatever articles. I mean, I can Google it. And okay. So I'm saying, no, I'm not going to be dependent on the candidates.
But we can, when we have proposals and go out, we can put whatever we think is important information to get from them in order to make a sound decision.
Yes,
I understand that. We have what we're asking them to apply for. I understand that. I'm talking about just the knowledge base, a neutral knowledge base for myself.
I think we can.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of things I want to name, particularly around community outreach, and just a question which I want to pose and we can talk about later. In terms of community outreach, are we intending to do this in person? What are we thinking about in terms of that with respect to kind of COVID restrictions? And also with respect to community outreach in terms of engagement, and what are we willing to do to make sure we're doing our best to make sure families are able to get out? So is that childcare, food, quite frankly? And so I think $5,000, I would suspect we would need to revisit that number if we're really talking about a clearly open and transparent and inclusive process. And so if the two other areas of, proposed, the legal counsel and the demographer are at the top end of the threshold, I think community outreach would definitely warrant us to think about a more holistic approach in that number to make sure that we are getting out to the community and that we're removing any potential barriers or just trying our best to identify barriers that may prevent folks from getting out and actually contributing to the dialogue and discussion.
Excellent points, Omar. Is there anyone else who has questions, comments?
I think for me, the other one is we need to come up with a timetable in terms of, I know that January 1 goes to the superintendent or to the board. So so that'll dictate to us when we're going to do the town halls or the community forums and whether we're going to be out more the county is or the state is going to let us be more out in the community than we are now. So I think a calendar, we need to work on a calendar at our next meeting. Maybe someone can come up with a proposed one, staff can come up with a proposed one, and then we can finalize. And then that'll tell us whether we can go out and do community forums out in the community with daycare and food. Yes, I agree, Jonathan. No, not Jonathan, Omar.
Any other further questions, comments?
I I would just like to mention that I always do better if I think of, the first Wednesday of every month or the second Tuesday. If we could try to make our meetings so that at least our group of 7 here, the first Wednesday of every month is fine with me, just like today. But I just do much better if it's always the same and not just arbitrary days. Yeah, so the other thing I wanted to say was I agree with Omar in that I think community outreach is going to be a very important part of this. And 5,000, I'm not basing this on any data or anything, but seems to me like not very much, especially when I think of the number of public meetings we're going to have. It just seems a little low, so.
And Richie, thank you for bringing that up, because you just triggered something. And a question for me is community outreach. Are we going to assign that? Are we going to hire that person? Are we going to assign it? Is the district going to do it? And is that a conflict? Does that become a conflict for an independent commission? I guess I don't know. Then I guess Harold or Jonathan, that would be a question for you. Is that something the district can do for us, should do for us, or is it something we should hire out?
And I believe that the district staff can do that for you. The district staff will function essentially as your staff. They will follow your direction. They're not beholden in that to, for example, the school board. They are following your direction and the steps to take, obviously within reason. So I don't know that you need to incur the additional cost of going out for someone else. The flip side of it is you're an independent body. So if you feel more comfortable, if that's something you want to explore, it's certainly something that can be discussed. It was not something that had been contemplated.
Are there any more comments or questions from commissions? If not, I can open up for public comment and then we can bring it back and discuss some more, but I see some hands. So start with Richie, then Genoveva, and then Craig.
As far as the translation services, I've worked in the district and I've been very impressed with the district interpreters. You have to remember translation is if it's written, interpretation if it's verbal. I've been very impressed with their work as far as translation and interpretation. I can only speak to the Spanish, but I've been very impressed, so.
Genoveva?
Yeah, related to outreach and staff, I'm still working really hard with the vaccination and COVID testing. And what we've learned, because we want to get the information to the community, obviously, and we've learned that sending those messages with community trusted leaders is very important. So what we've done is we pay a stipend. We pay $20 to a person who will then either, in our case, go by precinct and drop a door hanger, reminding them where the closest sites are for them to go get vaccinated. So I'm just thinking about the same thing, because we always have problems getting people to our meetings, to our community forums in our district. And so, and this is so important that we might want to consider some other options of using trusted community leaders. That's all I'm saying, that we would pay a stipend, not hire them. But.
And one of my questions about community outreach is, I think the Zoom platform has enabled us to meet without actually being physically present. And do we anticipate continuing this throughout the meeting requirements under the education code? So we have to have a meeting in each of our trustee areas plus at least 2 additional meetings. And I'm not sure how we would go about securing a location for an in-person meeting in the community. Is that something we'd work with the district for, or Is that something that we want to decide down the road?
Bobby, do you want to take this one, or should we hand it to Harold or Jonathan?
I could just weigh in briefly. I know the Zoom idea has surfaced, and we've seen, more participation through that way. And I realized that, and this is where Harold and Jonathan could weigh in. One possibility is, using, the district high schools, because they're, based on the trustee areas, like there's one high, like yours, right. El Cerrito, Hercules, Pinole, De Anza, Richmond, Kennedy. So they are, high schools in each trustee area that we could host the meetings and Zoom it out from there. So you allow, given COVID restrictions and whatnot, and that could be changing June 15th. You could allow, depending on capacity and whatnot, at gyms, and then Zoom the rest of it out. But I'll let maybe Harold and Jonathan weigh in on that aspect. But that's one thought I've had.
Yeah, Bobby, I think it's a good thought. We're all waiting to see what we're going to be allowed to do with meetings. We see a lot of school boards that are going to a hybrid model where they have, for example, the commission would all be in that location. You could have potentially socially distanced or masked audience there, and people can participate by Zoom. So we're seeing lots of different models. I think we'll know more in a few weeks, and we know more about that. The one thing that is the blessing in disguise of the fact that the state census data is so delayed is that normally by now you'd have that data and the clock would be ticking on you're having the 5 hearings before you prepare the first map. Your first map can't be prepared, physically cannot be prepared, because the data won't be available probably until sometime in October. So you have a little bit more breathing room between now and October to have those meetings. And another option just to consider is if you start in June, July, that's great. If you waited till August, for example, to start, we may be even more open to being able to meet in person. So there's just a lot of moving pieces right now.
And we did have Craig earlier who had his hand up for question or comment. Craig.
Thanks, Vicki. A couple questions on the budget. I think Harold mentioned that he was hoping we would be able to move forward with adopting the budget tonight. My question is there any compelling reason that we need to adopt the budget tonight or should do it tonight versus waiting until our next meeting? And along those lines, personally, I would feel more comfortable if I could actually see a staff report or some data or information to gauge how these numbers were reached. I know you're using your own expertise to determine that these numbers will be sufficient. But since we don't really have a staff report accompanying this budget and how these numbers were reached, I personally think it would be better probably to wait to adopt unless there's a real compelling reason we need to adopt. We should adopt tonight. And I think on the question of outreach, I'm curious if any of the other commissioners or district staff could shed some light into what the level of engagement was throughout the district communities when the current maps were created, and what kind of input and engagement you found from the communities involved during that process. Obviously, it's a little different since we're in the pandemic dealing with Zoom. And I would defer to the district representatives on whether in-person versus Zoom meetings are the best way to go. I do think there are advantages to both. The Zoom meetings definitely make it easier for more people to attend easily. But if there's a feeling that physically holding meetings in particular district areas helps with engagement and helps people feel that they're more personally invested in the process, I think that's definitely something worth considering. So I was wondering if the district staff could address those questions, and if fellow commissioners have any thoughts on these questions.
So just a little, I think what I heard saying earlier, boy, I'm getting back, is that we can do a hybrid of sorts, Craig, where we would meet at one of the 5 high schools, which would be in each of the trustee areas, but we could also have a Zoom meeting from that so that we could do both in the high schools. And so we may be able to achieve the Zoom part of the public and community outreach, when we would also be able to meet our needs of also going into each of the trustees by using that. Was that, did I understand correctly, or am I?
Yeah, I had noted that school boards are starting to do that. I think, Bobby, you might need to weigh in on just logistically if that's something the district has the right technology for.
Yes, we do have the technology to do that. You know, obviously we just need, you know, some warning about when it would be to set that up, but we have the capabilities to do that. In regards to your outreach, you know, again, I will say I was not heavily involved in the early part, but I did work with Marcus, and, you know, it was, you know, meetings were attended. We held them at local schools. You know, he visited local community groups. He leaned heavily on those groups and presented, you know, literally when and where they asked him to go. You know, there were times he was, you know, at a 9 o'clock PTA meeting and would go and present. So in that regard, you know, they were well attended, and we leaned heavily on our school communities to get the word out, which, you know, brings to Omar's point about babysitting, which was not included in here because we offer that service through the district. We have our district babysitters. Again, COVID situation, I don't know how that would work right now, but, you know, as Harold said, you know, by August, you know, well, definitely in the next couple of weeks, things are going to change. So we'll see where that moves. But they were, you know, decently attended.
And then in accordance with your question of adopting the budget, it was my understanding, I think I heard earlier, that we were on a timeline proposed by Judge Henderson that we needed to come up with a budget and within a certain time limit. And I think we're running right up against that. And so I think that's why it was set. We may have accidentally gone over the time already. So I don't know if one more week, if we need some more breakdown of the costs, or if we're ready to go forward. Maybe I heard earlier, and I could be, again, not summing this up correctly. I'm trying to listen and to summarize what I think what we might want to bump up the community outreach, to look for babysitters, to look for the stipend to get people out into the communities. Again, I'm not sure how that process would work with the board. We are independent. We could possibly go back and ask for 2,500 more maybe for community outreach, but we could say simply that it is up to that amount. I think we could always revisit the budget if we are finding some constraints. If we get RFPs back and we're off, I think we might have to go back to West Contra Costa Unified School District again and say, these are the costs we're coming in with. Maybe could you see that we need to increase our proposed budgets or our adopted budget. So those are probably the options we have. So at this time, let's kind of take that one piece at a time. Can we talk about the timeline in the budget? Maybe either Harold or Jonathan.
Yeah, let me help you with that. So in the stipulated order, so this is an actual court order that settled the litigation in this matter, the parties agreed that within 60 days of appointment of the commission, that you would in fact adopt a budget. The language is within 60 days after the members of the commission are appointed, the commission shall adopt a budget and submit it to the board. So that is a court order saying you've got to do it within 60 days. We believe you're still within the 60-day period. The stipulation did not expressly state what constituted your appointment. We interpret that being when the notices were sent out. You heard from Mr. Rafferty earlier, it took longer than we'd intended for the notices to go out originally. That was in part because we wanted to give Mr. Rafferty an opportunity to see them before they went out and weigh in on them. But at this point, we are within that 60-day window. So as an attorney, I have to tell you, there's a court order. It says it's supposed to be done this way. It would be my preference, my urging that it be done this way. The flip side is that if we cannot compel you to take action, you're an independent commission. And if for any reason you decide that you need more time, the risk would be that Mr. Rafferty or Ms. Ruiz-Lozito, who is the party to the litigation, would take some action against the district that it failed to comply with the terms of the order. I did hear Mr. Rafferty tonight actually suggest that you might want to take more time. So perhaps that reduces the risk considerably that there's a problem with it. But again, with my lawyer hat on, I have to say there is an order. It said it's supposed to be done this way. The last thought I'll share with you on that is one of the reasons that I think that's in the stipulation was to get the process going so that you could start getting the community outreach and moving forward. Everything changed because of COVID, again, because of the delay in the census data, which perhaps arguably makes it less critical now that it happened that quickly.
And if you allow me a chance to basically, mirror everything that Harold just said. If it comes down to the commission deciding whether it wants to adopt the budget today or next week or 2 weeks, I think it's could be constructive to recognize, at least from our interpretation of when the appointments went out, that the commission could still meet the 60-day timeline if it adopts the budget later this month, around June 22nd or so. And please, if you want to double check those dates, I don't want to say that that is the deadline, but from an interpretation, if you want to count 60 days from the dates that you guys were appointed or that the commission was appointed, that would lead us to later in June. And so there is that just extra information if you realize that, oh, we can reach a compromise and maybe wait 2 weeks to adopt the budget after having a little more time to discuss and review information and still reach this interpretation of the timeline.
So at this time, I would open this up for, unless there's any other questions or comments from commissioners. Richie?
Yeah, I guess my concern is whatever budget we decide on is going to be a ballpark budget that we will be able to modify. We're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but within a few, I don't know, 10, 20% of these numbers, we can modify them. And on the other side, if we put this off until whenever our next meeting is, which we haven't decided yet, I'm not sure how much more I would learn by getting the more specific numbers. For instance, if I knew how much the mapping services is going to cost, community outreach tools. I mean, it's still trying to anticipate future costs, and just to keep things moving here, I think it might be best if we just accept the proposed budget with an increased cost on the community outreach, and just say that this is a proposed budget. It's not in cement or stone or anything like that. So
I saw Craig's hand up also.
Yes, there's one other question I meant to ask on the community outreach, and the question of whether the district should handle the community outreach for us or if we should look elsewhere. And I'm just curious if Bobby could address the district resources at this point, and what those resources, how well equipped you are to do the same level of community outreach you've done in the past, not knowing what your staffing levels are now compared to when the previous process took place. So I think that's part of the question about whether the district can handle the outreach part of the equation for us. And then I would like to just hear, before we decide on the question of adopting a budget, I'd like to hear public comment, and then maybe we can come back and kind of make a decision there.
I agree. I've been trying to get to public comment, but also, oh, Derek, you moved. I thought Derek had his hand up. Oh, Omar, you had your hand up. Did you want to ask a question at this time?
I think we can, yeah, it can wait for later. Thank you, Vicki. It's fine.
So Craig, your hand's still up. So if you want to put that down, and Bobby, if you could answer Craig's question or to the best of your ability, or if either Harold or Jonathan can. And then I would like to open it up for public comment.
You know, I think what Harold or Jonathan echoed earlier, we are kind of your guys' staff to handle the outreach. I think we have the ability to do that. Our resources aren't exactly the same as previous, but we are building up back toward that. And I think my department would be able to handle the outreach for you guys. And it wouldn't just be my department. We would include, we actually have a community engagement department, so we would include them. They have additional resources to reach, the community, particularly at school sites. So I think we can manage that aspect of it for the commission if so desired.
Thank you.
I'll just piggyback off of what Robert said. I think the district does have the capability to help us with community outreach, because as the parent of a first grader in the district, we get a lot of information regarding some of the food distribution boxes, some of the communication about COVID, school reopenings, the hybrid scheduling, and things like that. So if we can tap into the available information that the district has, I think we would be good to go in terms of getting the word out about future meetings.
Thank you. And I'm going to open it up for public comment. And are there any hands from the public at this time?
Yes, I see one hand raised. Give me 1 second to get the timer up. Scott Rafferty, you should be able to speak. Mr. Rafferty, can you?
Okay. Yes. Well, first of all, again, let me compliment the commission in pointing out that the community outreach number is just way off. I think that City of Napa spent $5,000 or $10,000 in one day, and I was shocked when I heard that number. And they explained translations. It was a Sunday, and they had to do translation at 2 different facilities. There was a big premium for that. It turned out to be money very well spent. Translation is a big piece. You're also cannot rely exclusively on facilities from the district because there is you are right to ask about the experience from last time. I believe that was Derek who requested that. There was an appeal from the Latino community to have church-related events at the Latina Center, and there was support on the board for that, including from people who, frankly, were the most opposed on other issues, and it just felt like it was subverted by the staff. And there were meetings that were held at school facilities where people had to sign in at 6:30 and weren't heard until after midnight. So based on that background, you're going to need to have, you're not going to be able to rely on the district staff to do things in a transparent, effective way, and you're going to have to invest way more than $5,000. As to the demographer, I deal with a lot of these demographers. It was very unfortunate that the staff reached out to them in this manner without direction from the commission. They left a very strong impression that they were in charge of the choice with some of the demographers who have fed back to me. And I'm unhappy about that. Regarding Mr. Freeman's statements about the time frame, He was not involved in these negotiations, and he is completely wrong. And if you act tonight, my client's going to be very unhappy. And we have communicated in writing with the superintendent that Mr. Freeman committed to a federal judge to make the appointments within, to notify you of the appointments within a week, and he took 4 weeks, more than 4 weeks. Everything was done very unilaterally. So I don't think it's wise to upset the plaintiff on this, because we do have a role to play. Obviously, I don't have too much time left, but as to the attorney, there are other factors that I would be happy to share with you if there were time.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time?
Vicki, I do not see any other hands raised.
So at this time, I'm going to bring it back to the commission, and we need to make some decisions. We need to make some decisions either by adopting the budget, or by modifying the budget, or by setting up another time when we discuss the budget. And we need to do that. We can do it through consensus, or we can do it through actual voting, because it does say adoption. So what is the pleasure of the commissioners? Can I start with Omar? Would you start for us?
I guess I would be in favor of, quite frankly, doing both. I think it will be important for us as a commission to make sure we're clear about our strategies around community engagement, which have to do not only with the money we spend, but our tactics around making sure we're inclusive, that we're being culturally responsive to, like, some of the things that Scott just mentioned around where we meet, the time of day we meet, the day of week we meet. And so I think it's both. It's a monetary thing, but it's also a strategy thing. And so I would be in favor of adopting this budget, but knowing as a commission, it's just a placeholder for ensuring that we are engaging in an inclusive, transparent process. And if that means going back to revisit what that line item is, then we should, it sounds like we have the authority to do that as well.
Richie, you're next on my list, so I'm just going through my list, you guys.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't want to speak out of turn. I agree with Omar. I think that's a good way to proceed. I think the only modification, since I'm pretty sure that the 5,000 isn't going to be enough, that we increase that 2,500, maybe even to 10,000. We can all, like I said before, these are ballpark figures, and we do need to make sure we're moving forward. So thank you.
Next on the box, this is Genoveva.
Yes, I'd like for us to decide on the budget tonight, but I think I would like to raise that item to like $10,000 more. It's only 5, we would do 15,000.
Thank you. Derek, you're next. You're still muted.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I agree with Genoveva. I believe that the first line item for special counsels seems fair. I think the line item for the demographer seems fair, but I would agree with Genoveva that we can push up the community outreach to 10 or 15,000.
And James, you're next on my boxes.
Yes, I agree that maybe we need to consider the item for the translation community outreach. Probably if we know exactly the details, like, because we will have, each area will have 3 meetings. So that means 3 times 5, because we have 5 areas. And the other activities, and maybe each meeting will have also translation service. So if we can go with the details of them, then maybe we can get exactly what should be the appropriate number for the community outreach. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Craig, you're my last box.
Well, I do have some reservations about adopting the budget tonight because I just would like to see some more documentation in a staff report that actually lays out how this money will be spent, or we anticipate spending the money, and how these figures were arrived at. My concern is that once we adopt the budget and it's approved by the school board, and if we decide later that the budget isn't sufficient and we want to try to amend it, we would have to ask the school board to approve a higher budget, which they may or may not be willing to do. So my concern is that adopting the budget tonight doesn't necessarily give us the flexibility to change the figures later on. That all said, I think the majority of the commissioners do seem to be in favor of adopting the budget tonight. And if the commission as a whole feels comfortable with the budget, and it seems like there's consensus about bumping up the community outreach portion, I'm willing to go along with the rest of the commission if they feel like we should move tonight. To the Mr. Rafferty's point on the public comment, I'll just say from my standpoint, I only found out late last week that I had been selected for the commission. So, you know, this is all really new to all of us. It's really new to me. I think that we shouldn't necessarily rush into things, but again, if everyone else feels comfortable with this budget, I will consent as well.
Thank you. Being around for as many years as I have, it is kind of a guessing game. You have to look around and say, okay, I think we'll be up to this point. And more information that we get probably won't change our numbers too much, Craig. So I am also in favor of adopting the budget tonight with the increase in the community outreach. My understanding is while the West Contra Costa will have to approve, I'm not sure they have any recourse to come back to us to say, no, you can't go up to a certain amount. So I think the number we need to land on, we need to just land on a number. And I heard an interesting about 3,000 per pot for each area, which would be $15,000. So in summary, I would look for someone, because the chair can't make a motion, to make a motion to adopt the budget with the additional, with the increase in community outreach to a $15,000 community outreach, because the board, the commission really takes its job in community outreach very seriously.
Yeah, I would like to move that we accept the budget as proposed with the addition of an extra $10,000 towards community outreach.
I second that motion.
A motion from Richie Cook and a second from Genoveva. And so I believe I can we need to do a roll call vote. If we're on Zoom, the Brown Act does require us to do a roll call vote. If Bobby, you would call the names, and if you would answer aye for yes, no for, or nay for no, and abstain if you don't have enough information at this time.
Vicki, excuse me, do we need public comment on this before we vote?
We did have public comment, and there were no more public comments, so I brought it back to us to finish up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner from Trustee Area 1, Mr. Omar Butler.
Oh, aye. Yes.
From Trustee Area 2, Richie Cook.
Aye.
Trustee Area 3, Genoveva Callaway.
Aye.
Trustee Area 4, Mr. James Talua.
Aye.
Trustee Area 5, Derek Hilliard.
Aye.
At large area, Craig Lazaretti.
Aye.
And at large area, Vicki Gordon.
Aye. So the motion carries unanimously. So we've passed our budget. So we have met our due diligence with Judge Henderson. So moving on to our next agenda item. Item 8, whoops. Is,
Sorry. Give me 1 second to pull that up. Sorry about that.
okay. Item 8 is the discussion and potential adoption. We just did that. Item, oh, sorry, that was item 7. Item 8, discussion and potential adoption of proposed process for hiring special legal counsel and demographer for fulfilling the commission. Is there a report on this?
Yes, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. So what we do have is we have some steps that could be taken, more of a process. Can you guys see this? Do you need me to blow this up a little bit? So step 1, you've already just adopted. You just adopted your budget. The next process would go about selecting a special legal counsel and demographer. You guys, some of you touched on this in the previous item, just about push for requests for applications. So that is like a request for proposals. We could, under your guys' direction, publish requests for applications on the district website, make it known. You guys would set a deadline. There would be minimum eligibility requirements. We would conduct reference checks. All of that would be handled through the district's, apologies, and sent to you guys. Here are some suggested qualifications. Would you like me to read through this, or?
What's the pleasure of the commission? Would you like to be read through this, or would you like a moment to read it yourselves?
I'd like to just read it by myself, actually.
I think I agree with Richie.
Just let me know when you'd like me to advance it down.
Okay, I'm fine.
Anyone else need more time to read through? Looks like we're good.
Can we express questions on that piece before I go to another section? I'll forget what questions.
Let's get the full report and let's save questions, write them down, and we'll get to the questions in a moment. So can you continue on with the presentation?
And so after you saw those steps, and then, if you guys do receive, I think we listed it here, more than 3 applicants, there is another process to help kind of determine, kind of sort through those for you guys. We could go through that as well. And then the final step would be interviews for the, the applicants for both the special legal counsel, the demographer, and making a selection. During that process, you guys would have a meeting, of course, about it, to discuss the applicants and the preferred legal counsel and demographer.
So I'm going to open it up to questions or comments from commissioners first. Please raise your hand and I will be calling on you. First hand I see is Genoveva.
Thank you. Earlier, I had mentioned about a calendar, but I really meant a timetable, because all these things, obviously, we're going to have to put a time. We're going to put out the bid by whatever, July 1, and the timetable for all these activities. And the second question, the question was, where it says has not worked with the district in the past. No, neither have, let's see. Number 3, neither have represented the district before nor have been involved in the actual, okay, represented the district meeting in any area or just about redistricting?
Good question. Is there an answer, Bobby, for that one? Or is this a Harold and Jonathan?
This might be a Harold and Jonathan question.
So the question is, Harold or Jonathan, that do you mean representing on this one issue legally or before, or on any issue in the district before? Any legal issue on the district before?
You know, we actually put this together with the thought that it would be without representation of the district on any subject matter before. That's based in part, the district did have a sort of semi-autonomous commission previously that was investigating a bond issue. And that was the criteria. A lot of these criteria come straight out of that. We borrowed it from the prior process. They really wanted to show independence by having somebody who had no allegiance or past experience and had never been paid before by the school district for any work of any type.
Questions, comments from board members? Richie.
Yeah, my concern is that when this goes out to a bid, that we'll get these different proposals and we'll be comparing apples to oranges. And I'm not sure how to solve that.
Your concern is noted. I share that concern. I also have a concern about the independent nature of this and wondering, as was stated earlier, that if it does go through the district, that there might be some perception, either incorrectly or correctly, that the district will have an influence on who the commission selects as a demographer or a legal counsel. And I'm kind of wondering if we shouldn't set up, sometimes with these difficult and more complex issues like this, school boards or community colleges will set up a ad hoc or a committee to kind of start to go through the process to figure out how we go about doing this. So those are two concerns of mine. I agree with Richie, and then I've added one. Are there other questions, comments from board members?
Vicki, I think your concern and Richie's concern could be addressed in step 5 on this sheet here. Instead of it being optional, we could just have the commission review all applications for demographer and special counsel.
So we can do that as a whole, correct? Or we could do it in a subcommittee. Can I get some feedback on that, on Derek's proposal? This time I'm going to go backwards and I'll start with Craig first.
I'll reserve any comment until I hear what others have to say and public comment, if there's any public comment on this point. I don't have a strong position. I think, yeah, I think that I'm more inclined just to have, I like the idea that Derek brought up about having us review all applications. I'm not sure that we need a subcommittee but I'd like to hear what other people say and what the public comment is.
James, you're next on my list, on my boxes. Your comments?
So the comment, if about step 5, right?
Yes.
So yeah, if we have more than 3, so we need to like filter down so we can really have a focus interview on the like a top 3. So in that way, we can really select the best candidate.
Thank you. Derek, you're next.
My proposal would be to either have the entire board. I think the entire board should look at the materials of each applicant. Because step 5 suggests that we most likely will get more than 3 applicants for each position. And I think that would just help the board be informed when we meet to select the top 3. And I think if we get less than 3, then we could address that at that time. But it seems like we're expecting more than 3 applications.
Genevieve, your comments?
Yeah, my preference would be the whole board, which will then make it a public meeting. When you have an ad hoc committee with only 2, then it's not a public meeting. But if it's all, then it's transparent and I like that part about it. More meetings for us, but that's okay.
I also think that this will help you to understand what the breakdown and what they'll be doing so that will help with your other concern that you brought up earlier as well. Richie, your comments.
Yeah, I think, as we get the proposals, we will be looking at, gee, this person brought in something that none of the other applicants brought in, but it's important to us. And we can then go back and ask the applicant that didn't bring up this idea or this point to make another proposal, perhaps. What I guess I'm trying to say is this is kind of a process. We'll get these applicants, their proposals, we'll look at them. As we learn more about what's important in our decision making, then we can use step 5. And my other point would be to have the whole commission look at all the applications.
Great. So I'm hearing what I think is consensus in that we would like all of the proposals to come forward to the whole commission, and that the commission to do this at an open board meeting rather than making a selection. Is that a thumbs up? Am I correct at what I'm summarizing here? It looks like it. Okay.
One question. What's our feeling about the question of the district staff conducting reference checks on all applicants? Because I know, it sounds like, Vicki, you had a concern about the appearance of a particular potential conflict in regard to how directly involved district staff should be in this process. Do we envision all the applications coming to us initially, and then how do we handle the vetting process before we get to the interview stage?
Excellent question.
We could have the district conduct the reference checks after we've reviewed the applications.
And I think that would be prudent in that they have a understanding of human resources and the kinds of vetting that can professionally and legally need to be done. And I do not think it is a wise decision that any commissioner, commissioner or any group of us get together to vet. I think we could step into a hornet's nest by doing it ourselves. Derek, you're smiling and shaking your head. I'm glad. So at this point in time, it sounds like we have direction from the board that we will be, let's open it up for public comment. I almost forgot. So at this time, are there any other further questions or comments from our commissioners? Seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment. Are there hands from public comment? I cannot see those.
Yes, there is one hand raised, Mr. Scott Rafferty. Let me pull up the timer again. Mr. Rafferty, can you try to unmute?
Okay. I can't see the document anymore. And when I could see it, it was only bits and pieces. And that's somewhat problematic. I don't think you're getting genuine public input here. but I want to make a few points from what I can remember from the parts of the document that I was able to read. First of all, there was an emphasis on having done work for school districts, both as to the lawyer and as to the demographer. As to the lawyer, that is almost completely irrelevant and excludes people who have done civil rights work and administrative law work. What you really need there is an administrative lawyer. And I have to say, Mr. Freeman's understanding of the ex parte rules that were negotiated between us and the other attorney for the district is, I think, very incomplete. The two big jobs for the lawyer are transparency and ex parte, and that is a big job that has absolutely nothing to do with education law. And also mediating the relationship with the staff, which I think is important to involve an attorney in if you're going to have a semblance of independence. And the second task is Section 2 compliance. And you've just written out most experts on Section 2 if you're requiring 3 years of experience representing school districts. And you are basically writing out representatives of the Latino and African American and other minority communities. I think that's an imbalance. As to the demographer, I will come back to the fact that I think the amount budgeted for that may be a little too much. But again, you're talking about demographic services for school districts in the last 3 years. Well, that has demographic services in the case of school districts involves a lot that is not districting. So I think that's a spurious qualification. You may not have a lot of applicants here, but you're unlike any other school district in the state because you have this criteria, which is much more like the criteria that is applied by the Fair Maps Act to cities. So I would definitely widen the net there. And I think you need to disengage to the maximum extent possible the involvement of the staff in vetting and of the attorney's Lozano Smith firm. So that would be my feedback based on what I can recall having seen from that document. That document should have been posted in advance and we should have had real public comment.
Thank you, Scott. Opening it up to commissioners to for comments and questions.
Really quickly, and with respect to Mr. Rafferty's comments, is this a matter that we want to table until our next meeting so that we can put up the criterion for the selection for more public comment? I mean, we've already decided that we like the budget, but just so that the members of the public can see what our criterion are going to be and to have a better chance to comment on it. That would be my suggestion.
I'd like to go along with Derek on that. I think making sure the public has seen the documents and it'll give us more time to think about how we want to proceed. As Bobby mentioned, this is the first time so that this has been done. So we'll have to see what kind of response we get too. You know, if we don't get any applicants, that's going to be telling us something. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to go kind of slowly on this and make sure we get plenty of public input.
Craig, you had your hand up?
Yes, I agree with what Richie and Derek both said. I think it would, for the sake of transparency, it's important that the public have the opportunity to engage in this process to the extent possible, and the selection criteria for the legal counsel and the demographer are very important to the overall process, and they're really going to guide us throughout. So I think from that standpoint, I agree with them. I am curious, based on Mr. Rafferty's public comments, I am curious to hear what district council has to say about the proposal that the legal counsel have school district experience. What Mr. Rafferty said on that point did make some degree of sense to me, that really it's not, educational experience is not necessarily a critical element here, especially as we're looking at issues around election integrity and representation. I do think on the demographer side, I do think my instinct is that having a demographer with school district experience is important, even if it's not specifically related to redistricting. I mean, the redistricting era is relatively new, so I don't know that we're going to have, I don't know what the odds are we'll find a lot of demographers with a lot of redistricting experience, but I'd like to hear what and we could do it, I'll leave it up to you, Vicki, if you want to have them address it now or wait for the rest of the board, the commission to weigh in, but I'd like to hear what district council has to say on that question of school district experience and why they thought it was important to include that in the proposal.
I'm going to continue, commissioners, and we'll get the answers from the legal. And I will share some of my experience with hiring for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what some of the artificial barriers that we sometimes unintentionally set up, and how that excludes certain groups, especially minorities, from applying for jobs. So I will raise that about the criterion in a bit. And so going on with questions and comments from commissioners. Omar, are you?
No comments or questions.
Neveva, do you have questions or comments at this time?
The only one is that I think we should not make a decision tonight. I think we need to take some more time to look at the criteria and consider other things to be more inclusive.
And James?
No comment.
So, we have a kitty cat in the.
Oh, yeah.
So at this point in time, I do not feel that the commission is ready to adopt this part of it. They sounds, if I summarize incorrectly, please stop me, and we will get to Harold and Jonathan for you to ask our questions, but it just feel like we are not ready to move on this part of it. And it looks like we are looking at possibly changing the criterion, and that we need more time for discussion. So now I'll open it up to our Jonathan and Harold to answer Craig's questions and their comments.
Sure. What I would say is, first of all, what was laid out for you was the starting point. And it was a starting point that was built very much on a model that the district had used before for a slightly different context. So all of the discussion you're having is completely appropriate. You can decide what those criteria are going to be. The one consideration to think about with do you want to have it be somebody that's represented school districts versus public agencies generally? And I would think you would at least want to keep it within the realm of public agencies, because that is very different than the private sector. School districts are different creatures, and cities and counties and fire districts and special districts operate in a very different way than school districts do. The considerations you have are very different. Most of those other types of consultants or attorneys are not used to working with a constituency who can be transitional kindergartners, for example, or who are focused on the school boundaries. But that said, I don't think that that's a line in the sand. That's something completely for you to decide. If you want to say schools, you could always, I'm big on splitting the difference. You could always say that they have to have public agency experience, and that if they have specific experience with school district, they should note that, but not make it a requirement, for example. The other consideration with all of this, just to throw out to all of you, I know that when the district went through this process last time looking for an independent counsel, again, in relation to some bond related matters, they spent a lot of time thinking about the number of applicants they get and how they handle them. They ended up with 2 applicants. And and that was it. Because there's only so many people that want to dive into this kind of work. On the demographer front, demographers are getting booked up like crazy right now. Demographers that we know have started turning down requests for proposals because for the first time in the state of California, you have a quantity of entities, including school district cities and others, that have moved to by district elections or by trustee area elections, that there's just too much work. And so as you consider your criteria, we would suggest you don't want to go too narrow because you don't want to scare off demographers. Do I think it's important that the demographer have a school background? I think, Craig, you mentioned this. It's helpful. It's helpful for them in going through this, just as it is with the attorney. Is it absolutely critical? I don't think so. But in all of this, I'd also encourage you, don't wait too long, because again, these demographers are being booked up in a way we've never seen before. I think you'll get responses. I think you'll be lucky to get 3 or 4 responses, frankly.
Is there anything you would like to add, Bobby or Jonathan?
Nope.
So in summary, we are going to not make this decision tonight. We are going to look at possibly expanding the criterion, and we hope to bring this back. So we will have to be looking at our calendars to get another meeting on the date. And I think as Genevieve and others have expressed that this is, I think one of the commission's main goals is to make this as public and as open process and transparent as possible. And the suggestion of doing this publicly seems to have been met with consensus with the commission. Is that a fair summary, my fellow commissions? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but yeah.
Got it. Okay, I got a thumbs up from everybody. And Omar, were you good with it? There it is. Okay, we've got consensus from everyone. Outstanding. James, thank you. So at this time, that is our discussion, leads us right into future meetings. And I will let Bobby take over.
There is no presentation for this, as this is the first meeting and I don't know what your schedules are like. What I can say though, is that I would try to avoid Wednesdays, just given that our board to date since December has held 31 meetings and they've all mainly been on a Wednesday. So I wouldn't want to conflict with that and try to pull audiences. That would be my only suggestion. Other days are open. They do have some committees that, there are particular ones that meet, what has been like the first Monday or the last Monday. So they have committees that meet on Mondays and Fridays, depending on when those fall on the calendar. But that's just a notification. I'm not saying, here or there. I am saying you should avoid Wednesdays. I would try to avoid Wednesdays.
So is it a possibility, there was a suggestion, and I believe it was from Genevieve, to do a survey monkey or some kind of tally that we can look at what days and what times on those days work best. And I know Derek said that he has a work schedule commitment that can be very busy. So is there a way that we can get a survey out to see what dates and times, and can we possibly as a commission figure out, like was stated earlier in the meeting by Richie, which is, every second Tuesday every month, whatever. I just picked that randomly, but whatever it is, and then have that our set in stone date. And I will tell you that for the Brown Act, those kinds of things go over well with public, because they will know that, to look for the agenda at a certain time, and then they will look for our meetings at a certain time. So I have to put my 2 cents in and say, I agree that it would be lovely if we could land on a certain day and time that we consistently hold throughout the process and timeline. So are there other comments from board members on this?
Is our cadence once a month? Is that what we are Is that what this commission is going to meet, the frequency?
I'm not sure we have a cadence. We can set, and that's one of the things I think we should find out. I can ask Bobby, what do you think we need to meet once a month, twice a month? What do we have? We really should be looking at that timeline and working backwards from that timeline so that we can set up meetings and agendas and know when things are due, when and where and how. And as chair, I can volunteer to work with you, Bobby, to set that up and to work out with you to set up the survey and get those out to commissioners. If that's the pleasure of the commission. Richie?
Well, I was thinking we could maybe have one day that we always meet every month, like the first or second Tuesday, whatever it is. And then as an alternate or optional, we could have the fourth Tuesday, for instance. And then we can, after the first meeting, we can discuss whether or not we'll need to meet that second time in the month if there's anything pressing. So.
Mish, board members?
I would say, Vicki, that you and Robert set up the doodle to send out and kind of get a sense of what our preferences are. I do like Richie's idea of definitely a standing meeting and some type of additional meeting per month, if necessary. But I think you taking the lead in sending out a doodle versus us sitting here and trying to figure it out might be more efficient.
Yeah, I like Richie's suggestion of doing like the second Tuesday of each month, just because if we adhere to a monthly schedule, July, the first week of July is, 4th of July week. And I'm sure people are getting back to vacations or seeing family and things like that. So I know it's probably helpful to get the next meeting on calendar, if possible. So if we could just look at our calendars and see what that week of July 12th looks like, and maybe aim for the 13th, which would be that Tuesday, or the 15th, which would be that Thursday.
I'm out of town all that week for a family vacation, so sorry.
Okay.
I'm afraid to.
Good job, Craig.
I knew someone was going to zero in on the second week of July. Every other week in the summer, I'm open, I think.
Okay.
So should we just go ahead and do the survey, monkey survey?
Yeah.
Monkey survey, their doodle poll, we'll get those out to you.
Unless, what else goes out here, would folks, if everyone was available the last week in June, we could try to set up a date. Because that's about a month out anyway, so.
It depends on what day, not Wednesday.
Right.
How about June 27th? Would that work for folks? Tuesday the 27th?
I think Tuesday is the 29th, correct?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
That would
day,
for
that day
me.
works.
June 29th works for me.
Works for me too.
Evening again, 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
How does is 5 o'clock good for everyone? Because
yes.
5 o'clock, or do you need it later, Derek?
I was gonna say maybe 6.
Sure.
Just, because it seems like our meetings, if this first one is indicative of how long they're going to take, it might be helpful to get a little quick dinner before we meet. Because I have a 7-year-old and she's like, "What's going on?"
Yeah,
So.
as we were starting the meeting. So yes. Okay.
I think I also we need to agree how long the meetings are going to be. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. I think we need to. Otherwise,
That's if we want to keep it open to public, it will always depend on public participation in the meetings. And I think one of the things that we really want to do, or that I've heard from all 7 of us, is that we really want to have community involvement and community participation. So I have been to so many board meetings that I hold some of the records for the shortest meetings, you guys believe. But I also know that when you have a subject such as this and you have huge participation from community members, it is very difficult to get them in and out in a short period of time. It's very emotional. It's very, people are very passionate about it, and they will come, and even if what they've said has been said 100 times, they will feel that they need their voice heard. So we have to kind of adjust our thinking in some of our meetings to that way. But if we can, and I saw a comment about the material provided tonight, I just want to check with everybody. That is going to be posted to our website, correct? All of that information. And I would hope that all of our future agendas will have all of the backup material available to the public so that they can see and have community input. That would be very helpful to have that ahead of time. And also in Spanish from Maria. Thank you, Maria. That's very helpful. So those information, those are the things that we're looking for. And those kinds of things can really help move a meeting along. If we have all of that posted, if we have all the backup material posted, we can then get our questions down to a certain amount of time and get people up and in and out.
Yeah, no, I understand about public comment. Obviously, we have 30 people already on. We're going to have to probably change the time that they're allowed, because we might not want to give 3 minutes or whatever. And also, yeah, there's only 2 people. Well, we can shoot for trying to finish, do our business on time, kind of like to some degree.
Okay.
Please, that's common sense. Yes.
I will try and move the meeting along more quickly next time.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying you didn't. I'm saying I appreciate you and I admire you for taking on the chairmanship, and I thank you for accepting the chairmanship. No, I'm just like the dinner and the 6, okay, that, we're human too. We
I know, I feel my blood sugar dropping. At this time, if we have no public comment on this item, do we have any public comment?
We do have one hand raised. Mr. Rafferty, can you unmute?
I think I can be somewhat helpful here. It sounds like you have a couple administrative meetings at the front end of this process. And I would urge you to try to figure out your own convenience and just give the public a little more notice so that it's not just me and Ms. Lozito on the line, and post things in advance. And I think that's kind of stage 1. Then you have 11 hearings that you're going to have between now and February. So to the extent there are continuing administrative items, I think you can fold those into those meetings, or you're going to be having an awful lot of meetings. So for your own convenience and to increase public participation, I think those should be combined. Then let me just further segment those into 2 types of hearings. They'll have the pre-map hearings, where the demographer will kind of talk through, it's like a tutorial. So don't expect a lot of public comment at those hearings, and don't be disappointed if you don't get it. But make sure you post those, because people will watch them at their own convenience. And that's a very important function. Also, I don't think you're going to have as much controversy as you might associate with the CVRA cases, because all of the trustees are distributed now. This is not necessarily a horrible zero-sum game. So it's a regular redistricting, and you're having a lot of hearings. So when you get to this 3rd stage hearing where public input is really important, I want you to try to go a little bit outside of your comfort zone and try to mix things up a little bit so that people that can't come at night have a chance. Have at least one meeting on Friday. Have at least one meeting, on a Saturday, if you can, or a Sunday. Have food at some of the meetings. Try to reach out to your publics and see what they want. And in those cases, not only move the locations, but try to move the times around a bit. And focus on, at that stage, I would say, inconveniencing yourself and not worrying about regularity, just worrying about really reaching out and trying to maximize
the input from each community. So I don't know, I know that's kind of a blue sky kind of thinking, but if that helps, you won't be needing monthly meetings in addition to the hearings at that stage. I would combine that for your own sakes, and really, as the process moves towards its conclusion, get more and more focused on the convenience of the public and maximizing their real input. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment at this time?
Vicki, that is the only hand that was raised.
Then guess what, everyone? We are on item 10, adjournment. If there is no further business of the commission at this time, I move that we adjourn our meeting.
We are meeting on June 20, whatever that date we mentioned.
Next meeting, June 29th, was it?
Yes, June 29th at 6 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And
And how does the commission feel about, for this next meeting, let's get any materials up to our website 5 days before. If we're meeting on a Tuesday, that means they'd be up on the previous Thursday.
yeah,
Fantastic. If staff is available and up, we will get that information out as fast as we can.
The other thing that I'd like to have on the agenda, if possible, is the timetable. Even if it's a draft of a timetable, we can, change it, but just to get our schedules on board. Because it looks like not till October will we have the data, the census data anyway. So it's like this first month, we won't have much business except to hire, the attorney and the demographer.
Excellent.
just to review, there will be a doodle sent out for us to fill out.
Yes, for future meetings after the June 29th.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. And excellent job chairing the meeting, Vicki. So, yes.
Thank you. And I'm proud and pleased to say our meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Nice.
See you in a few weeks. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.